What is that on my pants? Not cool. Hi, hello. It impromptu rained. Ooh, I think I like that better. I should took this in. I'm not. Okay, anywho. It impromptu rained. It was not supposed to rain. There were also neighbors outside, so we will see. Okay. All right, let me go ahead and pray. I did want to show you this guy though really quickly because I think it's very pretty. One moment. Ooh. Isn't that pretty? Okay. Put you there. Anyway, it impromptu rained. It wasn't supposed to rain today, but good for the flowers. All right, let me pray. God, thank you so much for love. Thank you for all the things you have done, will do, and are doing. Thank you for all the ways you show up. Thank you for all the ways you're speaking to us through this. If there's something for us to hear, God, please let us hear it through your lens, through your filter. And if there's not anything that we're supposed to take from certain things, let it roll away, roll off, and continue on. Amen. All right. That's upside down. Okay. Love's longing. My father's prose was as poetic as his poems. So I had just read his poem, which I appreciate her sharing. If you don't remember yesterday, sorry. He's talking to, how did you get there? Ugh. Okay, sorry, there was a bug. Okay, I'll read it again. Kiss me, heavenly lover, in the morning. Be thou the first to sweeten this whole day's speech with that warm honey touch of thy caress. And tenderly, while yet each eye lies unawaked, come lightly and impart to them for day's long hour heavenly set, to see all things as through a lover's eyes, by soft caresses from the lips of him who lives in paradise. Kiss me, Christ of beauty, here alone the two of us, while dawn steals down the slopes and wakens day's bright eye to smile on me. Let not its luring draw me from the sense that I belong to one, whose first embrace full ravishes, who has kissed the sun. Before that, I did appreciate her including that. I think that it's easier for us to think of like a woman, right? Again, this is my thought process. I think it's easier for us to think of a woman thinking on God as a lover, right? As a friend, as a husband, all those things. I appreciate when I read portions of items written by men to God in the same exact way, because he is also that for them. He is our comforter. He's our friend. How come he cannot be that for everybody, right? Anyway, so I didn't read the opening too. It says Portland, 1951. So Portland, Oregon, 1951. My father's prose was as poetic as his poems. I find myself rejoicing with him the next selection from mid-January 1951, where he celebrates the view of evening light and the sense of God's surrounding presence and beauty. I shared that same amazement when awed by the glory and splendor of creation, but I don't have his ability to express it. All day the sun dropped hints of spring, and at dusk, returning from the shop, I exalted the distinct wall of purple, the Ozark foothills, close guarded by the unblinking Venus. The night spread black and blossomed brilliantly with stars. I walked out to the hill just now. It is exalting, delicious. To stand embraced by the shadows of a friendly tree with the wind tugging at your coat tail, and the heavens hailing. It started raining again. And the heavens hailing your heart to gaze and glory and to give oneself again to God, what more could a man ask? Oh, the fullness, pleasure, sheer excitement of knowing God on earth. I care not if I never raise my voice again for him, if only I may love him, please him. But the way he closed this excerpt takes me even deeper into the praise of our Creator. Mayhap in mercy, he shall give me a host of children, that I may lead through the vast star fields to explore his delicacies, whose fingers' ends set them to burning. But if not, if only I may see him, smell his garments, and smile into my lover's eyes, ah, then not stars, nor children shall matter, only himself. God gave him only one child, me, and yet gave my husband and me 8 children, with a little one already in heaven named Joy, whom I'm hoping he's met. Each of them knows God as the lover of their souls, the giver of all good things. They are, like all children, one of God's blessings as a heritage, and a part of Jim Elliot's heritage as well. Of course, he couldn't know all this yet in 1951, nor could he know, except in his keen mind's eye, the many challenges and adventures awaiting him hundreds of miles near the Earth's equator in South America, where he so wished to be. His being a missionary, for now, looked more like laboring for Jesus in the small Mississippi River town of Chester on the Illinois-Missouri border, 50 miles southeast of St. Louis. Ed and I bought January 11th. Ed and I bought a 38 Chevy and came here after New Year's. We have a $40 per month 2-room efficiency, whatever that may mean, apartment. I am cook. We could use anything any normal young couple of bachelors would find helpful by way of household hints. We have taken a job selling loaders to feed mills. So far, no sales. If worse comes to worse, I may have to get to painting again. Today we contacted the radio station owner, and tomorrow we will meet him to sign a contract DV. Deo volante, God willing. We will have a 15-minute program on Friday morning and a half-hour program on Sunday afternoon. It wasn't going to be easy, as he went on to observe in this same January letter. These things I write for your prayers. Ed and I are enjoying the work here, although adjustment to small-town thinking is different from what I supposed. There is nothing of any account for God in town, much formalism and joining of churches, but no life in its fullness, richness, depth, and reality as we have found it in Christ. It is as in the days of Samuel, the word of the Lord is rare, precious. Pray that it might run in us and be glorified. Ed has enjoyed a brief introduction to our dear AC. It is amazing how many I have found who light up and thrill at Make Me Thy Fuel or Hast Thou No Scar. Bless God for the sweet gift to his church. Nearly midnight. Good night, Bets, Jim. But as the month wore on, he and Ed were running on empty. A week later, he wrote in his journal, January 18th. No sales or income thus far, just draining resources, and those will not last more than another week. I have had hopes of laying by some money for the field, but selling is not going to be able to do that at our present rate. Desired to share in the work of financing the radio here and other evangelical efforts otherwhere. But God has hemmed me into nothing, that I may have nothing, do nothing, want nothing, save himself. His wanting to be nothing reminds me of Paul, who said he counted all things but loss for the excellency of the knowledge of Christ Jesus my Lord. Philippians 3:8. He wrote this poem also in January. Jesus, thou art now my end, thou my starting to hast been. Oh, be thou my present friend. I would walk on thee lean, and on thee lean. My nose is so itchy. Ugh. I would walk and on thee lean. My mother, meanwhile, still at home, was tutoring 2 high school girls privately, leading children's Sunday school and afternoon Bible clubs, and also working part-time on the sales floor of a women's department store in Philadelphia. Though it wasn't exactly where she saw herself headed, still, eager for the self-sacrifice of foreign missions, she received these current tasks as blessed opportunities from God's hand. She'd written the previous fall. The Lord, true to his word, has guided me once more when every possibility which I could see failed. It is when we cannot conjecture as to what he will do that he most thrillingly exposes his plan exceeding abundantly. Not that that which I can demonstrate to others of his leading is so unusual, but the soul knows the apparent disappointments are his new opportunities to love us and hold us by the right hand. I'm going to show her picture here. Do you remember how like they described her? I think she's beautiful. But anyway, she's so pretty. I don't know what the heck. Anyway, it says, she feared this picture might turn out to look just like me. And then, of course, I wouldn't have sent you one. She's so pretty. How silly we are, the way we view ourselves. Having finally filled the pages of her little 5-year diary, she turned now to keeping a series of notes, perhaps as a journal, that I may record only those days or thoughts which appear worthy of remembrances. Among the first of the year was this one, January 19th. Since I last wrote, I have read the biography of Francis Ridley Havergal. It did what other Christian biographies have done, deepen my hunger for knowing Christ in his fullness, for living wholly unto him who died for us. I am impressed always upon reading of someone who lived a holy life with the reflection, what would be written of me were I to die today? What would be written of me were I to die today? God alone knows how very, very little I know of true holiness, Christ-likeness, and Calvary love. My closest friends know that there is very little that could be truthfully said of my Christian character, but oh, let me cease from myself to behold the beauty of the Lord, to inquire in the tabernacle. For Christ is my righteousness. He is my joy, my peace, my salvation. He is forever, unchangeably, and altogether lovely. Praise him. I will trust him with my whole heart. He will lead me by his Spirit into all truth. He will do whatever his loving kindness dictates. From this humble, spiritually attuned heart, she composed her first letter of the year to my father. It contained, once again, a sisterly tone and message. February 1st. At last, I have returned to the actual realization that you're still a person, and not just a letter every month. Do you know the feeling? Especially when it goes way beyond a month, as it so often does nowadays. It is hard to keep fresh the memory of the real person. As before, she seemed to catch herself at this point, adding, I find this to be true with anyone, not just with you, Jim. I think she didn't want to give a wistful impression as though longing for him, but wanted simply to say, how very good it is to hear from you. The Lord has answered prayer and led you forth by the right way. Is it not wonderful to know that whatever other adjectives may be applied to our appointed path, this one invariably fits perfectly, for we are in his hands, whose ways are forever right. And I am thankful. She wrote freely, flowingly. She picked up a train of thought he'd begun in his previous letter concerning the importance of seeking the word of God rather than the word of man. I think now we, you and I, are beginning to reckon this paramount, she said, commenting that it was another one of those areas where they were feeling drawn toward the same spiritual emphasis at the same specific time. She made further observations on current events, practically the rather apocalyptic field of escalating war in Korea, following so soon on the heels of World War II. My dad was declared 4E draft classification, conscientious objector on religious grounds, which left him unclear on what the selective service would demand of him. As he described it, waiting is living these days. She also said she was glad that you felt at rest concerning me, Jim, referring to what he'd written in December about his comfortable, trusting feelings toward her. One can tell from her letter that she was mainly just enjoying talking with him, sad only that she felt straightened by this use of words, further by the condensing of them to fit a little 2x4 letter. But there will come a time when you and I will have no need for words, for I believe that in paradise we shall express exactly what we feel, effortlessly and perfectly. How could words do that? Well, it's fun to try anyway, and it is always good to share what we are able to share. One thing about his current situation, however, was truly arousing her curiosity. I have been wondering especially how the radio work is going. What a difficult thing this must be, to keep always in mind, when there is no visible audience, that the kingdom of God is not in word, but in power. 1 Corinthians 4:20. This radio ministry was a puzzle to both my parents. It was such a new, untried medium for religious broadcasting. Who was your audience? How could you know who was listening? What would cause those who were already believers to time for tuning in? And who of the non-churched would care to listen or feel led to respond by mail? Interesting to read her quizzical comment on hindsight now, aware of how her own radio ministry would occupy a treasured 15 minutes of each weekday for thousands of Gateway to Joy listeners throughout 12 flourishing years, and still be airing currently on Bible Broadcasting Network stations. Teach the believers, darling. It was the last thing my father said to her as he left on the plane with Nate Saint for the beach where he would be killed. When she'd asked, "What shall I do if you don't come back?" he answered, "Teach the believers, darling, teach the believers." Yes, and she's doing it today. Speaking of her curiosity, she also mentioned in this letter a perfectly maddening taste for the study of nuclear physics, stimulated by a friend of ours who has a PhD and who has shown me around his lab at Rutgers University. I spent last weekend with him and his wife. A month later, she'd be talking about a free clinic she visited in the inner city, sponsored by the Christian Medical Society. If I had had the managing of my life, she said, I should most certainly have been a doctor. She was just eagerly curious by nature about everything, and she loved knowing her youngest grandchild, Sarah, is currently in medical school. But nothing captured her attention more completely than both the present and eternal reality of life with God. Writing in her journal, she said, sorry, why did I get emotional? This was in parentheses, so this was all a note that she shared. And I just thought of how we can get so caught up with our own life. But who we are ripples. So it made me emotional to hear her daughter writing about her and then sharing this piece of information about her grandchild. I don't know, it touched me. But nothing captured her attention more completely than both the present and eternal reality of life with God. Writing in her journal, she said, February 11th, so long as we are in the flesh, I think we shall never be loosed from the things of time. Of course we shall not. Else how should we learn to be overcomers? This thought came to my mind as I came to my room to seek the Lord's face, and upon sitting myself at my desk, found myself reading over one of Jay's letters, from 1948 at that. Joy in its purest form shall never be found there. Fellowship with Christ alone rests the heart, cools earthly desire, satisfieth the longing soul. Watching these thoughts crystallize in her mind as she continued letting go of my father's affections, stirs in me the memory of my own falling in love as a teenager. I recall her telling me how feelings come and go, that I was probably too young to be absolutely sure this was the person I would marry, and that I needed to trust in God for his appointment and timing. But of course, I thought I knew his mind already. I knew God had brought the two of us together. Here was a guy with whom I enjoyed a lot of laughter, and who I thought was just plain fun. I was certain he must be the right one, but her wise counsel proved true. I saw this young man in a new light once we entered the same college. I realized I hadn't thought seriously enough about what it meant to wait and trust the Lord to lead me toward the husband he'd chosen for me. Reading her thoughts on the page now, from this distance, I see a young woman who'd been in the furnace of waiting much longer than I ever thought could be possible. Yes, she lived with questions. Yes, she felt her longings. But her sincere desire was to go only where the Lord wanted, and only to marry if he had chosen someone for her. Finishing the thought, she quoted a stanza from the hymn, My Faith Looks Up to Thee. Oh, may my love for thee, pure, warm, and changeless be, a living fire. Her love for God, made possible by his unchanging love for her, was the only reason for waiting and trusting. It remains our only reason too. The silence of waiting is the crucible of our faith. It's a highlight. And in February 1951, the crucible was as active in Chester, Illinois, as in Morristown, New Jersey. My father's next letter, February 22nd. Things are not easier here. Discouragement has hemmed us sharply this past week. For although we have known no lack in the outward things, there has been a strong sense of not having possessed boldly as we should have. Ed grows depressed more easily than I, and the scarcity of blessing hereabouts has not been easy to take. He said yesterday, Brother, everything I do here is putting out the fleece. If souls aren't saved, this isn't my calling. I see no point in putting my life into it. I couldn't find words somehow, and there was a long silence after. The radio work, a joy in itself, has yielded only one card of encouragement, and that from believers. We have asked and are asking for a witness that will divide the whole city on the true issue, but as yet there is no sign. There is a certain despairful loneliness snooping about these days, and I can almost hear the streets and building bristling with the note that haunted David, "Where is thy God?" I don't mean to sound dismal, but there's a certain bleakness about a place like this where no liberating truth is being sounded out. The synagogues are full, but still hollow with unreality. Synagogues. Oh, Bet, if earth in its brighter shades be so drear, what must its denser ones be? Thank God for that sense of looking for a city which has foundations, which prevails when one sees the basis of these. As if the lean ministry times weren't wearing enough, he was finding the business world a crude one, almost animal in certain aspects, and powerfully affecting to a newcomer as I regard myself. The very principle of making money by selling things at a profit is distasteful at times, yet it seems to be my job for now. One way he sought to combat the tug of both discouragement and tent-making duties was by treading fearlessly into the slums of was by tri- was by treading fearlessly into the slums one Monday night to declare the gospel. Not easy, but comforting to be among those blessed poor, with Jesus in a sense that we are not when among the self-sufficient. We must go again soon. It makes one scornful of vanity and not much I love with life, especially this life of banks and bills and rates and percentages. In addition, desperate for some way of sharing Jesus effectively, they'd gotten access to a little storefront space along the river. We hope to use it for children's meetings, but it must have some work done on it first. It has fallen into a terrible state and will probably take some time to recondition. There are many of the little raggedies about who will be our first fruits in Chester, we trust. My dad wasn't giving up, obviously, but he was uncharacteristically low. He mentioned Ed's parents passing through for a day or two. They'd been an encouragement, he said, but as he meekly admitted in the next breath, almost anyone from outside would be now. Integrity, simplicity have been our guides under God and are now our defense before him. This Jericho must fall, or I shall be unable to go on in the path of faith. Pray for us, as Jesus for Peter, that our faith fail not. What I see next is a marker, a turning point in the development of my parents' story. He'd never been the one in real need of encouragement, even during his Renaissance. When my mother had challenged him roundly, both in print and in person, he took it, dealt with it, and moved on to the next thing. He didn't let it slow him down much. But the wheels were really grinding at this point. His faith, though still incredibly strong, was being put to an extreme test. Some of the doubts which Ed had expressed out loud were now showing up more regularly in my father's journal. In my father's voice. February 24th. Was much cast down in spirit last evening. Ed and I have been here in Chester 6 weeks with so little evident blessing from God. March 5th. Evening, too weak even to demonstrate weakness. Have come to such a state that I must desire to desire. The tears of my heart are frozen in the cold of my intellect. March 17th. Sterile days. The past few days have been very trying and difficult. Have had 32 nights of youth rallies in Sparta with 50 to 65 out in the public school gymnasium. There is little interest and very few young people are reached in this way. There has been a sense of discouragement and doubt come over me through this. I prayed simply, earnestly, believing in so far as I knew how, and did not receive what I asked for, namely, 150 people and six conversions. I know all the old reasons for not being heard and getting better answers and so on, but all that does not solve this difficulty. Up until now, in all his correspondence with my mother, he'd often been the strong one who felt called upon to rally her spirit, exhorting her to sail forward on the winds of kingdom ideals, with him or without him. But now, as a true sister, my mother was the one who really stepped up, delivering just the right balance of encouragement and coaching. Seeing him in this state, I think she understood him better than ever before. She knew what he truly needed from her. And because the Lord had met her so richly in the recent days, she wanted my father drinking from the same well of divine sufficiency that she, too, had been surviving on. She didn't stop until she'd written one paragraph of 3 pages. I feel that I could write a book just about now. Forgive me. For our sake, I'll insert a few paragraph breaks so we won't tire at a word of it. March 15th. It was not hard to detect the discouragement in your last letter. It seemed to drag each word back. In a letter from your mother, she says she sensed the same in your letters home. Yes, at my father's prompting, she began writing to my grandmother again, with better results this time. Jim, dear brother, it is just here that the nature of your consecration, which is the same as saying the nature of your love to God, is tested. The decisions which are made in green pastures are tested. A good word, isn't it? Think of the test tubes in a lab, etc. So, the decisions which are made in green pastures are tested in the valley of the shadow, for it is here that he most vitally with for it is here that he most, vitally with us. If I may use the expression, although he is forever equally with us, since he, let me read that again, guys, sorry. No. The decisions which are made in green pastures are tested in the valley of shadow, for it is here that he is most vitally with us. If I may use the expression, although he is forever equally with us, since he tabernacles within us. You say, this Jericho must fall, or I shall be unable to go on in the path of faith. Surely you are not really thinking when you made that statement. The very principle of faith precludes any and all necessity of dependency upon anything but God himself. Do you love God for himself alone? Or do you love him for his gifts, his conscious presence, his love to you, his evident blessing upon what you do, etc.? This next part could hardly be in greater contrast to the spiritual expectations of most people in our day, and needs to be clearly expressed and communicated for this reason alone, if for no other. Jim, I truly believe there are, why am I having problems? Jim, I truly believe there comes a time in the progress of the soul who truly desires to be conformable to Christ's image, when God strips not only of earthly props in the form of friends, possessions, talents, or whatever he may have outside of God, but also a time when the all-wise, all-loving Father strips that soul of even his own conscious and evident blessings and gifts. These may include an infinite variety of forms: joy, a sense of his nearness, conscious grace and prayer, fruits which may be seen or definitively enumerated, etc., etc. This process, however devastating it may seem, must be recognized as another further providence, another gracious answer to our sincere cry of faith, thy will be done. When we ask in the most entire honesty of our hearts to be made like Christ, we ask usually with certain more or less vague ideas as to just what that means. But Christ takes us at his word. Indeed, why shouldn't he? For it is he that inspired that very prayer in our hearts. And as exceeding abundantly above all that we ask or thought. He proposes holiness, nothing less, in his child, so he sets about to produce just that in us by his own methods. It is the duty of the Christian to receive. He receives the initial step of salvation, which of course includes scriptural truth of immediate sanctification, but he also receives just as truly thereafter each new step in his progress of conformity to Christ. It is wonderful to know that it is not only required that we love God with a pure heart, but is also possible. The soul who loves God only for himself, apart from his gifts, knows indescribable peace. She closed with an uplifting spirit, sharing in his struggle. The Lord has been so merciful in leading me, in teaching me to trust in a way I never dreamed possible. I want you to trust him wholly, Jim, for the accomplishment of his will in you there in Chester. He will be glorified. Only believe. I am trusting for you and Ed. Perhaps the Lord does not purpose that you should ever see results. Oh, earthly word, not in Scripture, in order that you may the more clearly see him who is before all things. So long as the object of your faith does not fail, your faith need not fail. If that object, however, is the visible gifts of God, it may fail. If the object is God himself, it will never fail. I thank God for your friendship, and I praise him over and over for the way in which he has directed our paths in our relationship. I can't get over how wise and loving and merciful and father-like he has been. Because of him, Betty. I love reading that again, closing my eyes. I can picture her lips forming every syllable, and from the sound of it, my father received it with equal and humble appreciation. That's the picture of it. April 16th. Your last letter was like Paul's to the Corinthians, at once rebuking and comforting, and I am grateful for it. He then summarized her points in language of his own translation. This trial of faith, a courtroom drama constantly in session for believers, is more precious than gold, Peter says. It has been that here. Faith has been under fire. I think its source is Christ, and has been strengthened and proved precious. New problems have arisen, and combined with some unsettled ones, sufficiently to dishearten me. But God is faithful, and the prayers of his Son effectual when he prays that my faith fails not. Yet even with the ongoing challenges, he had a good many intriguing news items to report. This letter has been congealed up in the barrel of my pen for some weeks, he declared. His writing sometimes astounds me with its wild creativity and images and metaphors. I love it. First item, wedding bells. Ed has had 2 long jaunts up Michigan Way to see Mary Lou Holbuth, youth and music director for Robert Savage's Baptist Church. Just between you and me, Bets, don't be too surprised to hear about old Ed giving a ring soon. It isn't official yet, but this moody grad has sure been piling the letters into box 242 at least 1 per day. He is worse than I've ever seen him. Second item, Tidmarsh. Word that Dr. Tidmarsh and wife are arriving in New York this week. They were to have left England the 11th. I have been hoping you might have an opportunity to meet him, but I've only now gotten any idea of where you could contact them. I feel sure you will be stimulated by getting in touch with them. You will meet them there before I do. If you see them now, and I have not told them anything about you, but your contacting them now may be helpful in future reference. Future reference? Was this a hint at unspoken prayer request, or was it merely unintended foreshadowing? Third item, Ecuador, soon? I filed my passport for Ecuador last week. The brother I think I mentioned in my letters to you from Wycliffe, Dave Cooper, was drowned 3 weeks ago. He went out for a late afternoon swim in the ocean and never returned. His work and vision for the unreached, smaller tribes of Ecuador has got to be carried on. I've given myself to the Lord for it, if he wills. But as of yet, he still didn't know what the upcoming months or years truly held. Everybody is considering July marriages, but not one has given public notice. Bill C., Bob W., and Ed Mick are all sort of working on me to stay in the Midwest until then, but don't let it out until I can give official dates. I had hoped to be home by July, but don't know what the next few weeks will decide. He was starting to feel conspicuous in his singleness, brought on, of course, by the hard line he'd drawn for himself in college, which he steadfastly maintained until he was almost 25. But now, through continual contact with his best friends who were getting married or engaged, he was feeling the brunt of his own choice. Perhaps that's why he sealed this letter with a closing he hadn't used in a long time. Love, Jim. I think he just couldn't help himself in his impulsiveness. It's something we've rarely seen and won't see a lot again in their yet unclaimed future, but love, Jim. I'm sure she instantly noticed it, and I'm sure it brought a mixture of agony, hope, and consternation to my dear mother. Spring and summer. Mid-year brought more specific direction from God, bringing much encouragement as she waited for a clear leading on her mission purpose. The balance of the year would provide even more. May 2nd. New guidance from my Shepard, praise to him. Miss Haynes called last night to ask me to be pianist again for the InterVarsity Conference at Keswick, a nearby retreat center, in June. Although this gives light for just 1 week of the summer, it is light, and I need now only one step. How many times since college graduation God has seen fit to teach me this? Furthermore, I have been offered the job of a pianist at the Hepzibah Heights Conference in the Berkshires of Massachusetts for July and August. Oh, God's will. In this I am not yet sure he will show me. I seized this opportunity to speak of my mother's love for music. Not only for music, but for all kinds of art. She knew that God was the creator of all beauty. She knew that God was the creator of all beauty, and so she admired those extensions of his creation in classic art and music, often wishing she were more skilled in all of them. 1 second. The sun's starting to come out. But skilled she was, both on piano and in singing. She had a clear soprano voice, and she taught me to sing from the time I was tiny. Being put to bed while she recited prayers and sang the great hymns she wanted me to learn was a true joy and was instrumental in laying for me, early on, a foundation for my faith. It was instrumental in laying for me early on. Oh, I repeated that. As she often said to thousands, much of the theology she learned in life came from the hundreds of hymns her family sang as she grew up. She knew also, however, the need for being very careful with the praise she received from others for her talents. From a journal entry back in the winter, again, following a day at Keswick, she'd written, "Oh, sometimes I wonder if I should not abstain from singing altogether until I know that Christ alone is my motive. Truly, I do desire that my voice, as well as my life and will, be wholly given to his praise. But the flesh is ever with me, and manifests itself in the most singular forms at times. I discuss self-effacement, I think so, springing wholly from selfish motives, taints my very highest aspirations to act of God's glory. So I am driven once again out of myself, for I am all unprofitable. I am but a branch, and without thee can do nothing." A good word for all who excel at the creative arts. My dad wrote from Chester on May 12th, sounding more encouraged than he'd previously been. In fact, my mother had mentioned that even his April letter had been brighter than the preceding one, and was glad for that. Not only had he been able to schedule his first face-to-face visit with Dr. Tidmarsh in Wheaton for the following Monday, but he and Ed McCulley were finalizing preparations for a tent meeting campaign they planned to conduct in the coming weeks. Getting the gospel out was such a passion to him. May 12th. The Lord heard us for a tent this week, and we will begin meetings May 19th, Saturday, just 1 week from today. Please pray for us, Bets. I will be doing most of the preaching, and these every night meetings are sapping to spiritual potency, especially when half the day is spent selling. We had fair interest in the high school rallies 2 weeks ago, but mostly church people, praying for an awakening among the business people and factory class. He also described in more detail the work they were doing among the kids along the riverfront, their River Rat Sunday School, for which they'd coined the term Club 66. My mother, when hearing only the name, had quipped, "What on earth is Club 66? Sounds like a nightclub, but I don't think you and Ed are running one of those yet." Although she added, "It would take more than that to surprise me by now." The 66 is for the number of books in the Bible, and also the number of points required for a first-class member. We have a steady gang of 30 trustees every Lord's Day morning. It's the most encouraging thing here. Pray for several junior high kids who show definite interest and some understanding. Their tent meeting would eventually run through the middle of June. As with all ministry efforts, it was impossible to register the good that God has done in Chester, he said. But at least I can see several reasons for coming now that I did not see in January. Surely the Lord has led, despite nothing big or extraordinary taking place. Or maybe it had. Bill Cathers had come during the last week of May, staying to preach for a couple of days at their tent revival. May 23rd. Enjoyed fellowship with Ed and him together for the first time. Believe now that God is going to lead us into work together in Ecuador, and trust his grace to knit us and make us compatible. The Lord has answered, rather is answering, my prayer of August 9th, 1950, for another man. Father, preserve Ed and Mary Lou, preserve Bill and Irene, preserve me, and prepare us all for thy work in Ecuador. Many, many thanks for our leading to this moment. Lead on, O King Eternal. Truly, my parents' sense of waiting and watching and seeing the Lord's will is exemplary to anyone who's searching for what God desires for them, no matter one's age or place in life. My mother, of course, like my dad, was just as eagerly yet patiently seeking direction. She'd accepted a speaking engagement at a women's ministry, she'd accepted a speaking engagement at a women's missionary gathering in Philadelphia with high hopes that it might shed light on her future. May 22nd. I had felt all winter that perhaps God would open a way for me to get to the field through someone at the conference, but he was pleased to keep the cloud resting above the tabernacle. It has not yet moved. Then, hearing of Sir John Anthony Clarke's desire to meet me, I was once again elated, thinking that he might be God's channel this time. He is a veteran of many years of missionary work in the Congo and has done much translation work. Had a lovely talk with Mr. Clarke, but still felt no constraint toward any definite place. God has his reasons for this withholding of much sought light, and I trust him absolutely, having asked repeatedly that he would reveal any sin or failure which might be hindering his revelation of the way. I have trusted him to do this. Nothing, so far as I know, is between my soul and my master, so I rest in the peace that goes beyond. She seemed to have an unusual ability to make her mind rest and wait, though she also said many times to her audiences that she was a first-class worrier. Thus, she had that battle to fight, knowing how God commands us not to worry. Our natural tendency is to figure everything out, thinking God has given us a capable enough brain to do that. But as she often said to me, it is a matter of the will. You make a choice. Emphasizing the words will, choice, strongly, not to worry or fret. We must choose to obey, period. Oh, for such stilly devotion and courage. Oh, to be dependent on Christ alone for our peacefulness. She wrote my father only once more before spring melted into summer, finding time to write while she was away in Florida for her younger sister's graduation from HTA. As I write the date, May 31st, I remember 3 years ago. It all seems very remote and detached from my present surroundings. This whole visit really had struck her as being a surprising strain on her emotions, which she tried expressing in her journal a few days earlier. May 28th. HTA is to me the scene of the highest delights emotionally, sensuously. It is also the scene of agonizing conflicts of spirit, devastating fears. It is a scene of tenderest love for young people to put to my charge during the short teaching days. It is now a place of indescribable longings and loneliness. In a sense, I do not exactly know why. But she stowed away these private episodes of conflict, greeting my father with most cheery highlights and takeaways. 1 second. Oh, you guys, I really wanted to get to autumn. Okay, we're almost to autumn, okay? And then we're done. Where did I leave off? Dang it. Okay, but she stowed away these private episodes of conflict, greeting my father with most cheery highlights and takeaways from her trip. Don't get too organized, brother. May 31st. In many ways, as she could have been here for the commencement, I find that my attitude toward the school is very different from what it was 7 years ago. I should like to know your reaction. I know many things about it which you would not like. I also know things about you which they would not like. So it is perhaps well that you could not have been here. She also couldn't suppress a big sister laugh at hearing of his multitasking efforts, from tent preaching to children's outreach to Bible study, leading and beyond. You sound like a regular YFC leader now. Conference, retreats, schedules, etc., etc. Don't get too organized, brother. But within a few weeks, she too would be in organizer mode herself, wrangling a tent full of little boys at Pioneer Camp in Port Sydney, Ontario. I had the privilege of going to this camp for 2 weeks when I was 10. I'd never been away from my mother for that long and was never so homesick in my life. I'm sure I was surrounded by much beauty and spiritual teaching there, but the only things I could really remember, well, were the ice-cold lake water, flunking the swimming test, flunking the canoe test, and singing "We Gather Together to Ask the Lord's Blessing" before every meal. The only good part was my counselor, a sweet girl named Trish. I remember her comforting words more than her instruction. According to my mother's report, both in her journal as well as in a single letter to my father on July 29th, the place didn't sound a whole lot different in 1951. But for about 6 weeks, she said, while trusting God to lead me to the field in his own time, this campground became her mission field. His chosen sphere for me. My dad, meanwhile, had headed home following Bill and Irene's wedding in Wichita, Kansas, as well as Ed and Mary Lou's in Pontiac, Michigan. Yours truly feels more conspicuous by the hour, he wrote. But even returning home did little to put him at ease. Among his journal postings from those days was one that said, July 12th, lack funds in hand to buy equipment now. Folks are not wholeheartedly for my going to Ecuador, want me to be a preacher in the States, I fear, or else to join Bert in Peru. He didn't surface again on my mother's visible radar until a letter he wrote from Washington State arrived while she vacationed with her family at their annual summer retreat in the White Mountains of northern New Hampshire. He wrote it with apologies for this wretched ballpoint, remarking how he hadn't remembered to fill his fountain pen when he'd left home for their only family vacation. August 21st. You'll be at Gale Cottage by now, with the Pioneer Camp experience a remembered blessing. I rather envied your time there, for though nature sings loudly out here, it takes solitude to hear her, and I've had little enough of that since coming home. We came to this little cabin for the couple of days. Up here, there is a long peninsula with 12 miles of wide beach, good clam beds, and not a break of river mouth or mountain head, shouldering the sea and in the entire length. The drive is exalting to the spirit, but not so breathtaking as the more rugged Oregon coast. I never think of that without recalling Short Sand Beach with you. I haven't been there since and don't know if I would want to go alone. My first thought on reading this selection is imagining them together on the Oregon shoreline 2 years earlier, pointing out sea anemones to one another, or the way the water flowed over the rocks. She often did the same with me, always exclaiming about the details and designs of creation. My second thought is the rather noticeable longing in that final line, final word, really, of the paragraph. Don't know if I'd want to go now alone. Maybe it came from twice recently having to stand up for his friends on their wedding days. Maybe it came from feeling not quite as at home around his family and in his old familiar haunts as he'd once been so easily accustomed. Maybe it was the same gnawing of loneliness my mother had admitted to feeling as if out of nowhere on her brief visit to HDA, a loneliness that clawed at him the same way on the opposite corner of the country. Or maybe it was because, with his sailing date tentatively scheduled for December 1st, departing probably from Los Angeles, he said, he'd already drawn a circle around one particular piece of business he needed to handle before departing for South America. First, I'm coming east. Bill and I are scheduled for a meeting in the New Jersey, New York area from September 21st to October 12th. Some ministry, some missionary, but mostly to get acquainted with the believers. I have a few days open in a rugged schedule and would certainly like to see you if the Lord would have it. Will you be at birdsong? My father and peak filming on the right is what it says. He'd mentioned this prospect somewhat offhand in his previous letter 2 months ago, June 27th, in discussing the potential plans for his embarkation. There is a very strong possibility that I may be leaving from New York, and I am tentatively planning to spend a couple of weeks in the metropolitan area around October 1st. This brings hopes that I may see you again. If you are to be at home, I will make sure of a visit if you are there. But who could know? His plans were constantly up in the air. Had she considered his visit likely? I think she would have written about it, whether excited or nervously, certainly prayerfully, which she did within hours of this more definite pronouncement in August. Word came yesterday from 2 very different, significantly different sources, she wrote almost immediately in her journal. She'd hinted at the first in her entry from a week prior, while still in New Hampshire, August 19th. The Lord seems to have been directing my thoughts to Dr. Northcote-Dick's work in the Solomon Islands. I saw him a few weeks ago when I was over at Campus in the Woods, and he was very encouraging. I have written to ask for his literature and asking God to open or close this door as he sees fit. The requested packet of information detailing the work and opportunities for service among the South Seas evangelical mission apparently arrived in the same day's post as my father's letter, which accounted for the second word. For she added, Jim also wrote saying that he is coming east on September 21st. What did it mean? What did these two things converging on her all at once? August 26th. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart and lean not unto thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. This I believe. How very thankful I am that I am not my own, since I am the Lord's. He will show me the way. I know that I could never make the very weighty decision which faces me now. If the Lord directs me to the SSEM, it means utter renouncement, and for this he alone is sufficient. Utter renouncement, what heavy words. Though she'd long known this day was coming, she sensed now the finality of not sharing life with my dad. It was a window she'd already turned away from, allowing it to close, though imagining there might yet be a chance it could somehow open once more. The choices before her now, however, made utter renouncement nearly inevitable. Even so, her faith triumphed over her wishes and feelings. The struggles my parents experienced in their relationship were heart-rending and intense. The shadow of that cross knifing between them, the symbol of their own death to self, had been enormously difficult, a consternation. But as my father, too, had done, she was willing to say, My life is yours, dear Lord. Do with it whatever you want. She'd known of Amy Carmichael's leaving her dear family for the rest of her life by going overseas. She also remembered having met Betty Scott Stam, only to hear a few years later how she and her husband were beheaded in China. Each of these examples and many others were all pointers to her, declaring the high risk of following the truth, the high cost of discipleship. She didn't write my father back immediately. In fact, she wasn't thinking so much about the thrill of seeing him, but the torture of knowing she'd soon be saying goodbye to him again. August 27th. Last night I was beginning to dread already the parting which must come when Jay leaves. There have been 4 goodbyes so far, each one very difficult, but this, it seems, must be the last. I thought to myself that I could not go through another. Better not to see him again than to meet only in part. But how foolish of me to expect grace in advance. The sorrow of saying goodbye to one so dearly loved, when she was more sure now than ever that no future marriage was coming, would have been beyond heartbreaking if she hadn't possessed such serious, intimate fellowship with God. I sincerely think there are very few people who could willingly submit to what she was preparing to do, knowing that one word from her lips could perhaps enable her to avoid the foreverness of it. Countless people through the years have admired my parents' courage to go stoically on, past what human will or choosing would ever do. Count me, their daughter, as one who highly admires them as well, for so willingly casting all their care and each other on the Lord. As the summer of 1951 ended, with each day swirling down a funnel towards September 21st and my father's visit, my mother more often took to her paper, her thoughts too heavy and substantive to keep inside. In one journal posting, she wrote, September 9th, today I have asked again that the Lord will keep me from mistakes in discerning his will. Oh, it is so possible to be badly misled by one's whims, but I will not fear even this, for he has not promised. I will instruct thee. For he has not promised, I will instruct thee and teach thee in the way which thou shalt go. I will guide thee with mine eye. O Lord, if thy presence go not with me, carry me not up hence. For I have asked of thee, and I cling to thine assurance of guidance. Let me not go down to the South Seas, Egypt, and trust in Dr. Dick or anyone else who, if I place faith in him instead of thee, would even be a Pharaoh to me. And another, September 10th. There are things in my heart tonight hardly understood even by myself, fears, doubts, wonderings, huge questions, and instead of fretting myself about them or seeking anxiously for an immediate resolution of these things, I simply abandon them to him who is perfect in knowledge. Oh, I trust him. How wonderful it is simply to trust. But despite these rather daily entries on the private page, she apparently didn't quite know how to respond to my father directly about his impending visit. In fact, by the time he left home on his long journey by rail across the country, no letter had come from her. Nothing, no word. I can imagine him rolling along, mail by mail, mile by mile, jotting notes to himself about the various plans he needed to implement upon reaching the East Coast. Places to go, people to meet, topics for his various speaking engagements. Time would be short. He'd need to make the most of it. Yet perhaps he occasionally looked up from his writing, staring out the window as the blurred scenery brushed past, wondering why her silence. What did it mean? Had he pushed the brother-sister relationship too aggressively? Had he distanced her heart from him by being so vocal in his independence, so determined not to need her? If he indeed had allowed himself to daydream about rekindling their closeness on this trip, and I don't know if that's true, I wonder how much any disappointment was weighing on him as he traveled eastward and how much it may have competed against the focus he was trying to maintain. I do know when he'd made it as far as his aunt's house in Chicago, my mother's latest letter, which had barely missed him in Portland, had been forwarded ahead, and he read it with joy, admitting to being a little concerned not hearing from you before I left home, and wondered if I should make bold to visit Birdsong without an invitation. Her letter finally in hand made clear he was welcome. It was brief, saying she was glad to hear he was coming, hoping his days weren't completely booked. Much to say, but why write when we can talk? Yes, there is much to speak of, he agreed. In the letter, he dashed off to her from Chicago on September 13th, which she hurried to answer in a flash so he'd receive her reply before he moved on. September 15th. Your letter came this morning, and it surely seems strange to be answering it in the same day, now that we have accustomed ourselves. September 15th. Your letter came this morning, and it surely seems strange to be answering it the same day, now that we have accustomed ourselves to intervals of weeks. You say you plan to leave there Wednesday, which means that unless you are walking, it shouldn't take more than 30 hours at the most. So why don't you come straight to Philadelphia by bus, arriving probably Thursday evening? I can meet you there. You could stay here that night, and then we could drive up to Plainfield in time for your meeting Friday evening. It is about 60 miles, I think. Even if you don't get to Philadelphia until Friday a.m., it would be easier to meet you there than very late Friday night. Mother says the car won't be needed here at home that day. If this plan is okay, please wire me as to the time of your arrival. She went on to add that Bill and Irene were welcome to stay as well, if the two of them were coming. Her brother Phil, she said, was also looking forward to the visit. Everybody was really excited that Jim Elliot was going to be back at the Howard household again, like the Christmas of 47. And so am I, Betty. Doot. All right, you guys, today was longer. I'm sorry, I wanted to get through half of it. So, it's interesting. You know, there are little nods. And I will say again that I relate to a lot of, I feel like every single day. I think I just did it last night laying in bed. God, your will be done. If this isn't your will, it has nothing to do with anybody. It has to do with my own personal walk. So I want to say that. But yeah, anyway, I relate to it. Thank you so much for your time and attention. I appreciate you. Have a good day, night, evening, morning, whatever it may be. If I come back for the after, it's going to be short, okay? It's going to be, I have things I got to get done today. But I'll come back. I'll come back for like 5 minutes, but let me go get settled and check in on my son. So I love you. Thank you for paying attention to me. Bye.